Hello, magnificent people. The sun is shining, and I can tell you that there are a few things that are for certain in life. The first two are death and grey pubes, and I can tick one of those off the list already. And the third one that is definitely going to happen to most people is your grass is not going to stop growing. And this can mean only one thing: it is time to crack out the strimmer, the mower, hedge cutter, and all that shit from the garage. However, if, like me, yours has been sat on the shelf with fuel in it for God knows how long, just waiting to be fired up again in the summer, you're probably going to have some problems. So I put some fuel in it and discovered I had a fuel leak. The fuel lines that are supplied with these and the replacements are utter shite. They will go hard, start to crack and perish and break down. So I had a fuel leak, sorted that out. I thought I will just check for spark, make sure the ignition system is in good order. And that spark set fire to a little bit of fuel that was still behind one of the covers that I hadn't managed to dry off. So basically there was a fire and I pretty much fucked it. So I binned that and then bought this one for a tenner. Now I know nothing about this one. It could have been sat for a week, it could have been sat for a year, I have no idea. It certainly had some droppings in behind one of the covers. It was just sat in an open fronted carport. So just a bit of a side note, if you're going to try and sort out a starting problem, check for spark first. That's a pretty good one to remember if you can. So other than the what looked like mouse shit behind the covers, this one had knackered fuel lines as well. So that was certainly something that needed sorting out. And there's a couple other things I wanted to do to it that I'd done to the previous one, which I'll go through now. Generally speaking, these are pretty good for the money, and you can pick them up certainly fairly cheap. But what I'll do first is just clean out any crap from around the spark plug, so when I remove it, none of that shit will fall inside of the cylinder, and then put the plug back in the lead and just check for spark by pulling it over, obviously with the switch in the on position. For what it costs, I will just replace a spark plug. I don't see why you wouldn't really. Remove the cap and just pop it out. That is just held in with that triangular barb shaped bit of plastic. Have yourself a look inside of the tank. It's not too bad, but I will just clean it out with some compressed air. I didn't see the fuel filter when taking the lines off, and there it is. It had fallen in the bottom of the tank, so I'll replace that. Next, you need a 7mm socket to remove that nut in the centre of the choke cover, and then an 8mm socket and a Torx 20 to get the carburettor off. That's fairly simple stuff. Remove the throttle cable, which is just a dog leg in the end, and there we have it. Now I've given this a good clean with an old toothbrush, some brake cleaner and some compressed air in all the little ports and stuff. Check the gaskets, but ideally replace them. Gasket set should be fairly cheap for this. So this isn't the only reason I wanted to remove this entirely. I also wanted to get a look at the adjustment screws. Now these are tamper-proof. You can see there, they don't have any sort of feature that a standard screwdriver would fit. Now these are affectionately called the Pac-Man screw. They have a notch in one side on the driver head, and it looks like Pac-Man's face on the screw head. I don't have one of these, so to get around this, what I'll do is take a hacksaw and cut straight across that housing and both screw faces. So this will give me a couple of slots, one in each screw head, and I can make those adjustments with the standard flat blade. So if adjustments are necessary, if I run into running problems, starting problems or so on, I can make those adjustments. It's always worth checking your spark plug and reading it. There's plenty of information online about reading spark plugs for pretty much any type of engine. And there we go, nice and easy. Adjustment available now on both the high and low carburettor adjustment screws. Here's the idle speed adjustment screw, which just has a tapered tip that the stop of the throttle rests against. And before the carb goes back on, I'll just have a quick ganders inside of the crankcase, get a look at the side of the piston while I turn it over slowly by hand. Now that looks pretty good. There's no scoring or anything to speak of really, which is good news, because if it was fucked, I would be throwing it in the bin and buying number 3. Next up, blow job for the fuel tank. Just get those last bits of crap out of there. Now with the carb tube back on, I can check the throttle works, and it does, although I think there is more than an acceptable amount of slack in the cable, and with that will stop you from getting full throttle. And that may be because either the outer sleeve of the cable has collapsed or the middle inside has stretched, and there is some adjustment available for that. So slacken off the Torx 25, slide that bracket across, and then you should be hitting full throttle, but without stretching the cable or putting too much strain on it. So nip up your torque screw and you should be all set. Lovely. Now, all that's left is fuel lines and a fuel filter. So once they've been fed through the tank and the filter's been attached inside, making sure that the orientation is correct. And if you're not sure, when the strimmer's set on the bench and you're looking at the back of the carburettor, the lowermost fitting is the feed. So that should have the fuel pipe attached and the filter at the other end. Time to fill her up. The recommended mix for this is 50:1. So that should be written on top of the fuel cap. And if it's still got it, the sticker that's underneath the fuel tank. So once you've got it filled up, it's worth giving it a good shake just to make sure that two-stroke mix is thoroughly mixed up. Pop the cap back on and turn it upside down just to make sure the fuel pipes aren't leaking and the cap isn't leaking from the cork gasket underneath. And all being well, I should be able to press on the primer bulb as many times as I need to just to get the fuel to be drawn up through the filter into the carburettor. So you'll see that on the lowermost pipe, and there is a bit of shit that gets drawn up from inside of the pipe, so that's after the filter obviously, but I'll just keep pumping that just to try and flush it right through the carb and back into the tank, where the filter will then have a chance to filter it. So far so good. I'll just give it a few more pumps just to make sure everything's filled up as it should be. And all that remains is to make sure the switch is in the on position and give it a few cranks and see what happens. So the first thing I noticed, apart from the shit droppings falling out the back of it when I rev it is bogging down ever so slightly when I snap the throttle open. So I think there might be a bit of an adjustment to be made on the carburettor there with those mixture screws. But other than that, I'm quite happy. I was not expecting it to start quite so quickly, so this isn't a complete piece of shit, and I might get some strimming done. Yeah, I'm a happy man. For 10 quid, can't really go wrong with that. What I will do is run it up to temperature later on, switch it off, remove the spark plug and see how that looks, and I will compare that to a chart online and just see how it's running. Generally speaking, if the spark plug is a slight grey colour with even a hint of brown, like my pubic hair, then this isn't a bad thing. This is actually quite good. Anything else, then cross-reference that to a picture online for a two-stroke engine, and then you can try and find some advice on why it might be looking the way it does. Anyway, this seems to have worked. I'm going to give it a try later on and see how I get on in the garden. And if you enjoyed this, then drop me a like and a subscribe. That would be amazing. And until something else fucks up or I fuck it up, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers! Thanks for watching.